Compassionate Leadership and Conscious Business, featuring Blaine Bartlett. Tap into extraordinary wisdom with Blaine Bartlett, CEO of Avatar Resources Incorporation, as we have a candid conversation surrounding the power of compassion in business. We'll explore turning possibility into reality and enhance consciousness for self-improvement. It's time to elevate your leadership game and meet the soul of business. Welcome to the Wellness Driven Life Show, where you're about to go on a wellness driven ride. I am so pleased to introduce the guest that we have here today. Let me tell you a little bit about him. Blaine Bartlett is the president and CEO of Avatar Resources Incorporation, a global consulting firm he founded in 1987. With vast international experience, he's a recognized expert in leadership development and organizational change, and is sought after as a speaker worldwide. Blaine holds critical roles in impacting organizations, and it is a certified executive and organizational coach. He was knighted in 2012 for his humanitarian contributions. So therefore, I am so pleased to help welcome to our stage today, Mr. Blaine Bartlett. Welcome.
April, it is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for asking me to join you.
Well, the pleasure is truly all mine. Thank you for being on the show. Now, Blaine, as I research more about you and getting to know you more, I'm excited for this conversation. And there's so much about you that I can't possibly cover. And I don't think either you could on this show today. So let's start by sharing just a little bit more about you with the audience so they can get to know you more.
Yeah, boy, I don't know where to start with that. Just as you were saying here, I've lived a long life, and so there's been a lot of things that I've done and a lot of things that I've experienced. I think, probably the easiest, and this will move us into where I think we're going to be going in our conversation. I grew up on a small farm in rural Oregon, and it was that growing up period where I first really began to appreciate, the power of nature as a teacher. And that, that little seed, and I'm going to metaphorically here, that little seed got planted, and it's actually sprouted in some very interesting ways in the course of my life. I've managed to, like you mentioned, found a company in 1987. We had offices in 5 countries at one point in time before the pandemic. I've lived in 4 countries. I've traveled. I've got roughly almost 5.5 million air miles. Done a lot of traveling. Yeah, I don't wish that on my worst enemy. Honest to gosh, I don't. That's way too many trips to the airport. But the idea there is when I start looking at the trajectory of my life. Coming from a small farm, getting up at, literally getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to milk cows and stoke the furnace. And where I am today and the work that I do and the people with whom I get to interact, it's been a fascinating journey. It truly has been.
Well, there's something certainly to be said about those experiences, getting up early, working hard. You learn so much from that experience of just being active in those ways. And I find some of the most incredible human beings learn humility very quickly because of those experiences. When you are working hard, when you're getting up, when there's time sensitivity with all of the things that you're doing and working with the land. You mentioned there's that appreciation for nature. There's nothing like it. And so much of what we talk about on this show is really getting back to connecting to nature. Now, we live in such an incredible day and age. There's scientific studies that are saying, yeah, you have to have that. It's really essential for our overall well being.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I'm fortunate, we live on an island now up in the Pacific Northwest, and I've got 11 acres on the water here. And most of it is, we've maintained the forest. And in Japan, we used to, take a forest bath. I mean, I would go out of Tokyo. I lived in Tokyo at the time, but we'd take a train trip and we'd go up into the mountains and just I had to get back into nature. I'd go, the base of Mount Fuji, Lake Biwa, and a number of different areas there, and just take a forest bath, walk through nature. Just, it's unbelievably grounding. And so I've got that here. There's something about paying attention in this way that begins to inform how I live my life. And there's a phrase that I'm very fond of. It's called ontological design. Yeah, how do I design an environment so that it designs me in return? And most of us, in my experience, most people in my experience, don't pay attention to the environments live and work. And as a consequence, they are by default being designed in a way that is not harmonious. And they're being designed in a way that is not connecting. They're being designed by cacophony. They're being designed by deadlines. They're being designed by pressure. And that's not a healthy way to live. Nature doesn't work that way.
Right. I love that term. I have not heard it before. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now, I have experienced very much so with my past and my career life how our environment creates who we are, like you just
Yeah.
mentioned. Make sure that you're creating it before it creates you. And there's so much behind that. I remember the first time that it really came to my awareness was in my early 20s, and we learned about the broken window theory. I went into law enforcement, and so learning in criminal justice, we found that statistically there's higher crime in the areas that aren't taken care of. And so the broken window theory states that when there's a broken window and you take the time and the effort to fix it and clean it up, then people have more respect and they have more pride for their environment around them. And so in turn, it creates less crime because there's not that internal chaos. And fascinatingly, I found that when I was in law enforcement, the homes that had the most chaos, the homes that had the most disturbance, that were unwell and not at ease, were living in a place that was filthy. It wasn't cleaned up. And so there's so much to be said about that.
Yeah. Very good friend of mine. He's passed now. He passed 2 years ago, Bob Proctor. I knew Bob very, very well. He was at my wedding. I've been to his home a number of times, and he used to tell this story. And he and I developed a couple of programs, and we would teach together sometimes. But he would tell this story about an acquaintance of his that had asked him to do consulting work with him. "Yeah, can you coach me?" And so Bob agreed after a little bit of pushing, agreed to stop by the guy's place of business and just have a conversation about what that might look like, what that might entail, what he was after. He walked in and the place was a mess. And Bob looked around and says, "Yeah, I'm catching a flight in an hour and a half here. When I come back, I'll stop by here, but this place had better be cleaned up because unless it's cleaned up, and by cleaned up I mean I could eat off the floor cleaned up, I'm not going to be working with you." And the guy went, "What are you talking? Why does that make a difference? Why does that make a difference?" Well, here's the notion: awareness. From an emotional intelligence perspective, awareness is the foundational pillar of emotional intelligence. Well, how do you define awareness? For me, awareness is a noticing of where the spirit moves to and through me is either accessed or blocked. Spirit is always moving to and through me. Where is it blocked? Where is it or is there an opening? So Bob was basically saying the spirit can't move through your business here. It's blocked. This clutter is not working for you. So the guy said, okay. And Bob came back. The guy had, he almost literally could eat off the floor. And Bob ended up doing some work with him to some very good results. But I never forgot that story when he first told it. And it was kind of like, I get this. I really get this. And I would go back and look at, okay, where has that shown up in my life, in clients that I've worked with, that sort of thing. And clutter blocks the movement of spirit. And that's something that we want to pay attention to. How do I design the environment so that it designs me in return?
Blaine, that's so beautifully said. And so you have your own podcast as well. And I know you've been doing that for quite some time, called Soul of Business. Is that correct?
Yep. And you're going to be on the show. So I'm looking forward to having you on the show. This is going to be a great we're going to start a conversation here and end it over there.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me too. And so, yes, absolutely. There's so much to be said about it. And I love that you go that direction. And, Bob is such an inspiration to so many people and will continue on being so. And it's things such as that. When you go into business, you learn, especially entrepreneurship, you learn very quickly that you have to tap into that essence of yourself, that it has everything to do with it. I like to say that if you claim that, soul, spirit, all of those things are not a part of business, then it's like saying that you don't have skin, because it is part of who we are. We're emotional, we're energetic beings, and all of that has to, and I'm not saying religious, I'm saying spiritual. There's a difference there. And that's something that we need to tap into in order to really express and have it move through you.
Yeah, I become a vehicle for the expression of spirit, and spirit is undifferentiated. I mean, it truly is. It, in its basic form, if we can give it form, because it doesn't have form, but it becomes differentiated when you look around and you see a tree, when you see a rock, when you see a person, when you see a baby, when you see a dog. You see differentiated expressions of spirit, the same spirit that's moving to and through. And business is no different than that. Business is a differentiated expression of spirit. And if we lose connection with that, we lose connection to something that is unique, that sets us apart from any other business on the planet. And if you're looking for competitive advantage, your competitive advantage lives inside your business. Your business is an expression of it. Where is that most organizations have it blocked. It doesn't vibrantly come alive.
Right. That's what creates the individual piece of you expressing itself out into the world. And so I find it so inspiring and refreshing for people such as yourself, Bob Proctors, all of those people of the world that are really bringing spirituality into business. They're shining the light on it. Fascinatingly, I've been told by a number of people that you can't bring that in. Like if you're going to do public speaking and you're going to speak on stage, in front of corporate world and go into that arena, that you can't go that direction. And I strongly disagree with that. I think that it's all in the way that you present it. I think that there's a beautiful elegance in the way of which you can bring it to the forefront and show how important it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember one of the very first talks I gave on compassionate capitalism, which many people at the time thought was an oxymoron. But it was at a gathering of the Renaissance weekend, and I was in Charleston at the New Year's gathering of the Renaissance weekend, and I gave a talk on compassionate capitalism to a group of Wall Street bankers. As my mother used to say, you could hear a pin drop in a in a lead balloon factory. It was kind of like nothing was flying. Nothing was moving at all. And it was a very interesting conversation after the fact, because what I began to appreciate was the need to be able to shape the listening of the audience. In this case, the audience, shape the listening. get them to a point where there's at least a curiosity about what it is that I'm positing, that I'm bringing to the table here. And starting with, compassionate capitalism. This is an oxymoron. I mean, how do these two, oil and water, come together? I didn't start with that conversation at the beginning, and as a consequence, when I just dumped it on the audience, it was kind of like, whoa, what are you talking about here? This does not match my worldview in any way, shape, or form. And I had to do a lot of work. The audience should never have to do a lot of work, at least on the front end, to hear what it is that I'm saying.
Yeah, well, that's a great example of early on learning that aspect where there is a way to weave it into the teaching and the conversation.
Yeah, yeah. You get it's life is a conversation. It is. Life is a conversation. And what I mean by that is I don't just have a dialogue with somebody. It's how do I converse with conversation with how do I interact? How do I actually engage? And I have a conversation with gravity every day as I walk across the floor of my home. And when I walk out in the forest, I'm having a conversation with gravity. And to the degree that these conversations are healthy and generative, I've got a pretty good relationship with gravity, if you will. What kind of conversations do we have typically in businesses? Well, those conversations typically are around, are we hitting the targets? Are we, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? And we're not talking necessarily, and we're not generally having conversations about how are we doing? How are we doing in our environment? How are we doing in our community? How are we doing with our people? How are we doing? All of those relational hows don't get brought to the table in a way that people can actually organize around them. And until they get organized, all bets are off, because all any organization is at the end of the day is a collection of people that are in relationship. That's all any organization is, whether it's a family or whether it's a business, whether it's a community, whether it's, let's just take Congress as an example. Just a collection of people in relationship. If the relationships are working well, you've got a pretty good shot at being successful. When the relationships start going south, you've got all kinds of mischief, that you have to deal with. And when I talk about it in that way, people go, well, gosh, that makes sense. It's kind of almost a duh, because they think of the interpersonal relationships, my relationship with you. But we also have relationships, and I mentioned gravity. I have a relationship with gravity. At work, I have a relationship with goals, with values. I've got a relationship with my chair. I've got relationship. Everything in an organization, whether it's a business, family, political environment, community, has a relational component to it. And from a leadership perspective, that's what I want to pay attention to, is the qualitative nature of those relationships. And if I'm paying attention to it in a right way, awareness, where's the spirit moving to and through, I'm going to have a pretty good platform to move possibility into reality, which is my tagline there. That's kind of what we work with.
I love that. Move possibility into reality, because you're learning how to utilize those energies into the proper flow so they can be shown and be created into what you want it to be, really. I mean, there's a lot of different terms for that. Like alchemist comes to mind, where you're really learning how to move those energies and utilize them based on, first and foremost, your awareness of it. And
Mhm.
so, that said, Blaine, you're so brilliant, and I love having you here, but you have some extensive knowledge because of your experiences, and some of those being some influence in the Eastern philosophies. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, I lived in Japan for about 5 years. I've always been fascinated. The one of the biggest gifts my parents ever gave me was when I was 12 years old. My mom sat me down, and the family, we were Protestant. I grew up, going to a Presbyterian church and that sort of thing. Mom sat me down and she said, "Look, Dad and I have given you the religious education, or exposure to the religious education, that we're familiar with. We really don't know about anything else. You're 12 years old, you're old, start making some decisions on your own. So you don't have to go back to Sunday school. You don't have to come back to church with us. There's more out there. And so the invitation was go explore, see what makes sense to you, because it's not all in one little bundle. Life is an incredible smorgasbord. I've never forgotten that, because I did. I went out and I started exploring Sufism. I started exploring Buddhism. I started exploring, the Muslim religion. I started, Hinduism. I got, involved with some of the Vedas, and I went to a Zen monastery in Japan. And and this is not a new epiphany by any means, but what I discovered for myself, and it wasn't something that I read in a book, but I discovered it for myself, was that all of the great religions, all of the great books around spirituality and the way that life is constructed, all contained the same message, that everything is connected, that it's all part of a greater whole. And, we will get wrapped around the axle real quickly if we start saying this is the only truth that there is. That's not the only truth that there is. Truth, in order to be valid, has to exist everywhere and be valid everywhere. If it's not valid everywhere, it's not the truth. So that was a journey that I continued on. I mean, and that was, oh goodness, 60 some odd years ago when Mom sat me down. So it's been a while. But that, I've never forgotten that, and just being willing to listen in different ways, to hear in different ways, to be quiet sometimes when somebody's speaking, rather than saying, no, that's not right. Right is a wrong way to think, if I can get kind of polarized in the language there. Does this work or does this not work for me? That's a better
Yeah.
question than, is this right or wrong? Is this good or bad? Is this working or not working? That's a relationship question. Right and
Mm.
wrong, good and bad are values questions, and values are made up.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that what you're saying is it's a relationship question. And so, Blaine, I know you've come into that a few times throughout your life, I'm sure, where does this work for me or doesn't it work for me? Can you give some instances of how you reacted in those cases where you chose a different way rather than sit there and argue or battle it head on? You choose a different direction because it doesn't work for you.
Oh, I've got lots of examples. I've been divorced. So, I mean, marriage is a great example of that. Uh, we still have a relationship. And the realization was that, yeah, we couldn't live together, but the form of the relationship did not need to remain what it was. We still have the relationship. The form has changed. And the form that we have now works for both of us. The form that we had previously, when we were married and trying to, work within this little box, didn't work. But what kept us there was, it's wrong to get a divorce. It's right to, that right wrong conversation. Now, I'm not questioning the values. People get to have their own values and they get to make the decisions around that in a way that works for them. But I found in my own life that the question of, is this working or not working, gave a lot more flexibility and was far more generative in terms of how we actually accommodated each other's needs, because neither one of us were getting our needs met in a very fundamental way.
Yeah.
And I remember our therapist at the time said, you seem to be taking this form apart with more love and care than has been in it for the last 2 years or so, which was
Mm.
absolutely true. We were not interested in burning bridges. We were interested in what works.
Yeah.
And that was, that is at a personal level, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Well, that's
Business
an
wise, yeah,
incredible
go ahead.
example.
Yeah.
I just wanna stay on that for a minute because I think it's a great example. Many people have gone through that experience, whether it's divorce or just relationships in general with people that we love and care about, but we are growing and in different directions, right? Where it's not working for us any longer. And so I appreciate that you mentioned this. And of course it feels better for the both of you, because if you're handling it gracefully and and respectfully for the other, then you have a greater understanding that once we do this and we do what is working for us, is we're going to feel freer, lighter, happier. It's just going to be so much better. And it makes sense to me to call this similar to tapping into your intuition,
Yeah.
listening to yourself, what feels heavy, what feels light. There's a lot of different ways that you can listen to yourself and go within meditation, listen to your body. How does it feel? Is it
Mhm.
working or is it
Yeah.
not?
The inner speech, and you've probably heard people talk about this. I know some of the guests that you've had on your show are very familiar with this statistic about, well, the average person has anywhere from 60 to 75,000 thoughts a day that run through their head. I mean, it's a noisy thing. This is noisy up here. It's really noisy.
Monkey
Um,
brain.
Monkey brain, it really is. And
Yeah.
80% plus or minus, 80, research shows, upwards of 80% of the thoughts of those 60 to 70,000 thoughts are repetitive. They are the same thoughts I had yesterday. They just keep, kind of cycling through, which is a great way of understanding what we call mindset. This inner speaking becomes manifested in my external experience of what the world is. There's nothing out there. I mean, literally, there is nothing out there that is not a function of what's in here. It's an expression of what's in here. What I'm dealing with is nothing more than a mirror. And when I begun, start looking at, okay, is that working for me? Rather than going, well, that sucks. They need to fix it. Uh, no, there's no they.
Right.
What do I need to adjust in here that begins to manifest itself as a different reality out there? And this is where, again, the working, not working question comes into play. I was working with coaching a client. She was a new medical director, excuse me, in a large hospital system. And she was new to her job. It was the first time she'd ever been a CMO, chief medical officer. And she was having a lot of difficulty with one of the senior executives on the executive team. And this guy had a reputation of being a curmudgeon. I mean, and he was not just a reputationally, he actually was. And she was just not, how do I make this thing work? And he needs to change with her inner thinking. He's such a jerk. Why doesn't he change? He doesn't understand. So all of this energetically it's being done to me. It's coming back at me. I'm a victim in this consequence. Now, she would never have copped to being a victim, but that's what the inner talking was actually generating. So what I suggested she does, rather than making him wrong, rather than making herself right, that whole right-wrong dynamic, looking at it through the lens of what's working or not working. And I invited her. I said, look, I'd like you to play with me here on this. So let's take the next 6 months. And she went 6 months. We had a year-long coaching contract. So I said, yeah, for the next 6 months, here's what I want us to work on. And it's going to benefit us in a different way than you think is, in a different way that will be more of what you want and less what you don't want. So here's what I told her to do. I said, I want you to just start imagining anytime you have an opportunity to have a conversation with him, imagine before the conversation exactly the way that you want it to work. So basically, I just had her, construct a vision in her mind about a perfect conversation, a perfect relationship working with this guy. And she said, that's crazy. I mean, that is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard come out of your mouth. And I said, it probably is, but you said that you play along with me, so I'm going to hold you to that. So she did, and she just kind of, and I check in with her once a week. We'd have a little touch base, and then once a month I'd meet with her physically. How's it going? Are you still doing this? She says, yeah, I'm still, and nothing's changing. I don't worry about anything changing. That's not why I'm having you do this. And it really wasn't. It wasn't about, I don't want the, that's going to be what it is. She started playing this in her mind in the morning before she would come to work. At the evening when she would go home, I'd have her review Yeah. Did it go sideways? If it went sideways, replay it in your mind working exactly the way that you wanted it to work. Don't get held captive by it didn't work. Just reimagine it having worked, because you'll begin to notice things that you could have paid attention to that perhaps you were missing. And she said, okay. She started reporting. Yeah, I noticed that I could have said this differently. And so things started to happen with this. Fast forward here, just in terms of our time, by about 6 months into this process, and she'd been doing it, really regularly. She, I remember this. She came in to the meeting, that we were having. She says, "I'm not sure what's going on with him, but he's changed." And I went, "What are you talking about?" She says, "Well, we had a meeting that I thought was incredibly contentious because it's one of his pet peeves, and I really struggled with how I was going to bring this to the table, and I brought it to the table, and he was going, let me tell you, how can we work with this?" He was amazing, and I went, "Wow, that's interesting." And he said, well, "He changed." I said, "He didn't change. Everything is energy. Everything is energy. It's always moving." So when she started changing in here, how she was describing her relationship with him, energetically, it moved a frequency. It bumped something into a different plane. And now she was literally manifesting something that was in alignment with that new inner speaking. And he didn't change. She was just projecting a different reality out onto this screen that we call life. And it took her
So
a while to
powerful.
do that. Very powerful. And it was organized around what's working, what's not working. Keep your focus on what's working. What do you want it to look like? How would you like it to be? That begins to open the door to the soul of the relationship, the soul of the business, if you will. Because awareness is about noticing where the blockage is and noticing where the opening is.
Yes, very, very powerful. And in turn, I mean, it's all creating you to learn how to think that way. And so because we have those reoccurring thoughts, the majority of it is the same thoughts over and over and over again. You're retraining your brain and your body to respond differently in a better way. So I love this story. Such a great story. We're going to move into our commercial, and when we get back, let's talk a little bit more about some of the other things that you've learned and what you're excited about doing next. Stay
Great.
tuned. Are you ready to take control of your ride to wellness? Rev up with Driven Living. Visit www.drivenliving.com and buckle up for a journey. Get exclusive access to our Wellness Driven Life Show guest portal, where you can dive deep into the minds of our esteemed guests. Sign up for our newsletter and get insider scoops on these distinguished personalities. It's like having a backstage pass to their life-changing wisdom. But that's not all. You'll also receive a free hug. You heard me right, a free hug. An enlightening ebook from the Driven Living team. Discover the science-backed benefits of hugging yourself. It's a fill-up for your wellness tank. Because at Driven Living, we believe in fueling your journey to wellness, both physically and psychologically. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.drivenliving.com today. Welcome back, everyone. Here with Blaine Bartlett.
Give yourself a hug.
Yes, give yourself a hug. That feels so much better. And so, thank you so much for sharing all of the things that you have. You have incredible stories. You are living testimony to all of these things when it comes to energy and creating things and making them come to fruition. And so share with us a little bit about some of the things that you do on a daily basis in order to keep this up in your life. I mean, again, I know you're living testimony, all the things that you have created in your life, but what are some of the things that you keep sharpening the saw with?
That's a great question. So yeah, I study every morning, and I don't miss this ever. Yeah. And when I say I study, it's selected sections of books that I'm reading, or passages of different articles or tomes from folks like Neville Goddard, um, Thomas Troward. I mean, these sorts of writers that are steeped in a philosophical understanding, the whole Enlightenment, with Emerson. I study. So I'll spend an hour just taking a passage, and I'll take a paragraph apart. I'll take a paragraph and spend an hour on a paragraph. Um, just looking at, okay, what's really meant here? How does this apply to what I'm doing in my life? Where does this actually show up? So that kind of stuff is, I find that just invigorating as hell. I really do. It's just, I mean, it's kind of like, oh God, I've never thought about that way. The application of that in that way, that is fascinating to me. And those sorts of things come into play. Um, so that's an hour that's taken up in the morning. I meditate every day. I've been meditating since the 1970s. So it's I don't sit for hours at a time anymore. But 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening, just to kind of settle and decompress at the end of the day, set the day up on the front end. So yeah, there's kind of a bookend there. And I'll go for a walk, take the dogs for a walk. My wife and I will go out every day, and we got two mischievous Pomeranians that running all over the place, but they need to get outside. So we'll take them for a walk. It's a couple miles, and like we live on an island, so it's beautiful. So that's the way I just keep connected to nature. I'm outside every day, pretty much.
Yeah. Mm. Well, that's beautiful. Life learner, which it wouldn't surprise me in the least. I feel like some of the greatest people, that's part of their greatness and the continued greatness is by being a life learner. And I think it's really neat how you say that you'll stay on one subject and pick it apart. And when you think that there's things that you come across over and over again, the same concepts, it's like going to an area and seeing it for the first time. Same area, same place,
Yeah.
but there's so much detail, right? There's so much detail to life, to the world, to nature, to being insightful with all of the things that you could create. I mean, it's truly limitless. So and I love that. And you did mention I used to meditate for hours. I think that there's certain seasons in our life that
Mhm.
we investigate how things work and going within and learning that. And now you're so well in tune with that. It just takes a few minutes every day to just really ground yourself, go within, get connected, and then move throughout your day.
Yeah.
And that as you close the day, the bookends. So I love that you do those. I like asking my guests, what are the things you do to maintain being successful? Because it is a continuous journey. It's not something that where you reach that success point, it doesn't stop, right, Blaine?
Yeah, absolutely. Earl Nightingale, and some of you that are listening may not know who Earl Nightingale is. He was a very famous radio personality back in the 1950s, 1960s. Was the most listened to radio personality at the time in the world. He was asked one time, how do you define success? And he said, after pausing for a little bit and thinking about it, he says it's the continual pursuit of a worthy ideal. The continual pursuit of a worthy ideal. And that definition has always stayed with me because a lot of the work I do with organizations and leaders is around how do we sustain success as a business? How do we sustain success as an individual? And what I've come to believe is that sustainable success is the process of developing the capacity to continuously start over in pursuit of a worthy ideal. So most people don't have that capacity built. We talk about it today in the context of grit or resilience and that kind of stuff. Yeah, capacity. It's awareness. Develop my awareness capacity, but I've got to have a worthy ideal in front of me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and which is not the same as a goal. To make $1 million. A worthy ideal. Is that worthy of me? The spirit that moves to and through me. Is that worthy that thing that I'm envisioning having those sorts of things
Mm.
come into play here. And most people would like to think of success as a straight line. It's just kind of, yeah, I get on this trajectory and I go to school, go to the right school, get my degree, then get into the right college and get, whatever degree I get out of that, find the right person. So these little check boxes that are on this line, keep on that line, you're considered to be a success. You fall off that line and oh boy, that just kind of, what happened?
Disappointing, right?
It's disappointing. Success looks like a plate of spaghetti in the real
Yeah.
world. It really looks
Yes.
like a plate of spaghetti. Um, and I can't not be on the path. It's impossible to not be on the path. But most people don't
Mm.
know what that worthy ideal is, so they don't feel connected. And they get disillusioned because they're not on the path to a worthy ideal in their mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that, when I can be, most people are far, in my experience, more people are far more clear about what they don't want than what they do want. And that makes a big difference in terms of how people experience living.
Mm. Well, because life is constant change, that's a universal law. Everything is constantly changing. Your idea and your goals and your worthy ideal too should
Mhm.
be changing. It will
Yeah,
change.
it
And
will.
you're correct. People are so fixated on, having this in the box mentality where there's no fluctuation with that. Is devastating to many people. And I'm a lot younger than you, Blaine, so I am just learning a lot of this in life where,
Yeah.
when we identify as something, someone, then that's going to be shattered, usually, right? Because that's
Mhm.
life. And
That's
when it
life.
is because you identified so strongly, because your belief system is there, then it can be very detrimental. But when you realize and understand and have the awareness that we're constantly evolving into something new, and we get to create a new being out
Yeah.
of ourselves, that's when there is freedom and joy.
And, again, I go back to, the nature of nature, growing up on that farm. And in Oregon, state of Oregon, temperate climate, there are natural seasons. Now, you live down in Texas, so they're not as marked as they are up in the
I grew up
Northwest.
in Colorado.
Oh, okay. So
Yes,
you get the idea
Texas
here.
is new to me. I'm still acclimating. We're working on it, but yes, I get the idea of seasons.
Okay. Yeah. So seasonality. So yeah, nothing ever dies. It just, it may look like it died. It may look like it went away, but there is nothing in nature. And this is a lesson for businesses. And this is a lesson for business leaders. There is nothing in nature that serves as a center of accumulation. Nothing in nature serves solely as a center of accumulation. Everything in nature serves as a center of distribution. And that's the nature of seasonality. Things get distributed. Apples fall from the tree, they get picked up by critters, and seeds get distributed. And everything is a center of distribution. Nothing goes to waste. Everything is utilized in some way, shape, or form over time. We get fixated in business by on accumulate market. I want to accumulate a bank account. I want to, so the focus becomes on accumulation, and it's a consciousness of scarcity. It's a consciousness that is born out of scarcity. There's not enough. Nature has no concern about not enoughness.
Right.
It doesn't. And as a consequence, it is continuously giving. And one of the things that as a practice for the clients that I work with whom I work is the notion of generosity. Yeah. How do you leave people with the experience of increase? By being generous. And generosity has a ripple effect. There's a generosity impact. And if you're paying attention, you're giving generously, there is an impact into the organization, into the community, into the business.
Mm.
And that is a generative impact. When you're being parsimonious, you're holding on, that too has an impact. It's contractive. It's not creative. There's no innovation involved with it. And yeah, and the soul becomes stifled. And when we're looking at a healthy business, these are businesses that are generous. I mean, they really are. They're businesses that are generous. Um, and they still make money. Go figure.
Go figure.
Go figure.
Ah. Blaine, you have been doing and creating so much in life. What are you most excited about creating right now?
Leaders that are making a difference in the way that I think difference can be made. I look at the world today and I see leaders that are in positions of authority that are creating things that are not, and they're not creating things, they're destroying things. More precisely, they're stifling the expression of the human spirit because they want to be right about an ideology or about a position, about the way that things should be done. I love working with entrepreneurs. I love working with young people, and I say young people, I'm anybody younger than me is going to be a young person. But folks that are starting their businesses, that are running their businesses, that are in business. The purpose of business is to create the opportunity to thrive on this planet. That's the purpose of business. You do that well, create the opportunity to thrive. You're going to have people beat a path to your door. We need leaders that know how to do that, to create the opportunity to thrive, not just survive. Survive comes out of scarcity. Thriving is an abundance. And it's an abundant world. I mean, yeah. There's another rabbit hole I could go down. I'm not going to go down it right now. So, but that's what that's what I'm enjoying doing right now. I love writing. They've got a new book that we're coming out. My wife and I are developing a program right now on the generosity impact. So that's going to be coming out next year. I've got a couple of different book projects in the play. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out here. We get to do all kinds of things I've never done before, and this is kind of cool.
There is so much to do. I don't disagree with that. And I really love how you mentioned thrive, because and another way that I describe it a lot when I consider what my drive is, what my purpose is to help evolve humanity. And I think that is the same thing. It's where
Absolutely.
whatever we're doing, it is to aid in that, it's the growth, the self-improvement. And when we do that, it just helps lift everybody else. So Blaine,
Yeah.
you have been an incredible guest on the Wellness Driven Life Show. I want to make sure everyone firstly knows where to find you. I've had it displayed on the screen for those of you watching in, and for those of you listening in, it is www.blainebartlett.com. Find out more about him there, and it is also in the description below. Blaine, thank you again. Is there anything else you want to share with our audience today?
I think that just as kind of an invitation more than anything else to the listeners. Yeah, today find a way in your life to be a center of distribution, not a center of accumulation. Yeah, whatever it might be. Distribute a hug. Distribute a twinkle in the eye. Distribute something. Just because you have it, give it away. Just because you have it, you don't need to hold on to it. It'll come back.
I love that. Blaine, it's such an honor. Thank you. And thank you so much for our audience. Without you, the show wouldn't be possible. So goodbye for now, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, April. Take care.